From the International School at Tel Aviv University, you're listening to Rihla, the podcast of the MA in Middle Eastern Studies program. Rihla is the Arabic word for travelogue. The Rihla Podcast brings you stories of our students' journeys as they live and study in Tel Aviv and travel throughout Israel and the wider Middle East.
So, Andrew, could you please introduce yourself?
Well, my name is Andrew Vitelli. I'm a student at the International School, studying for my master's degree in Middle Eastern Studies. I'm from Westchester, New York. I'm a journalist by trade. Went to university at University of Maryland, where I studied journalism. This is my first time actually studying the Middle East, other than perhaps a few classes in undergrad.
So, what brought you to the Middle East?
This is actually my second time here. Last year, I came for about 8 months to do a fellowship with the government press office, which is, it's not quite the spokesman's office, but it's kind of something like that handles government media relations on behalf of the Prime Minister's office.
So you lived in Israel already. Where did you live?
Last time I was here, I actually lived for about 4 months in Tel Aviv and 4 months in Jerusalem. When I was in Jerusalem, I was on the Mount Scopus campus, which is kind of on the outskirts.
So how is it like living in Jerusalem? It seems to be a very tense city.
I was living on the campus, which is kind of a different experience altogether. Then if you go downtown to Ben Yehuda Street near the Old City, that's really the touristy area. You see a lot of Jews, Arabs, religious Jews, tourists, people from all over there. And then obviously if you go to the Arab neighborhoods, it's a whole different experience. So there are a lot of different neighborhoods with very different feels in Jerusalem.
And right now you live in Tel Aviv.
Right now, yes.
How is it like living in Tel Aviv, also in comparison to Jerusalem? Is there a difference? Can you feel that the atmosphere is different?
Absolutely. Tel Aviv, I always say, it's a little bit like a bubble in Israel, in that if you didn't know where you were, you could walk outside, you see everyone speaks English, you see cafes, you see a bunch of bars. People are pretty much dressed in secular Western clothes. You see beautiful beaches. You know, you might, other than the mosque in Jaffa and everything, you might think you're in Miami. Whereas Jerusalem, there's no place in the world quite like Jerusalem. There are a lot of different religions there, a lot of people who are very religious, who wear religious clothing. Everywhere it feels like or I shouldn't say everywhere, but there are a lot of places, especially within the old city, where it feels kind of like you're taking a step back in time. There's really a special feeling about Jerusalem that you really don't feel anyplace else in the world.
So you have experience living in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, but you also organized several trips to the West Bank. So where have you been so far?
I'll organize small trips with a handful of friends, not formally organized big excursions. But yeah, just so far we have been to Ramallah, we have been to Bethlehem, we went right before Christmas, we've been to Nablus or Shrem, and we've also taken just a day trip to Hebron.
That sounds great. How is it like visiting Bethlehem in Christmas?
It was the weekend before Christmas, and it was a lot of fun. They had a big concert there. There were people from all over the world. I think generally Bethlehem, it's a tourist destination, but it's not necessarily the most hopping city. But this is a weekend where you really have people flocking from Asian countries, from America, from Europe, all there to for the festivities. There was a nice concert, a big tree, and it was a really fun experience. It was a really fun trip.
And how did you get there? How do you enter the West Bank?
It's actually not that bad. I always thought it was going to be something that was incredibly complicated, but you just have to take a bus to Jerusalem, and then you take the light rail to Damascus Gate, and then there are a bunch of bus stations that'll take you all over the West Bank. So usually it's just a bus, a tram, and then another bus, a smaller bus, and you can get pretty much wherever you want. Or if you have a car, you can just drive, but not my situation.
Where did you stay?
In all the cities we've been to, there are some nice little hostels. There's a nice hostel in Ramallah that's actually called Hostel in Ramallah. Then in Bethlehem, we stayed, I think it was called the House of Peace Hostel. These are little places where you get a bunk in a room like any other hostel. It'll cost you 50, 75 shekels, and it's really everything you need. If you have a bigger budget, there are also hotels, especially in Ramallah.
And what did you do there? Was it merely sightseeing, or did you experience other things as well?
It was really to, first of all, see the sights. And Ramallah, we saw Arafat's grave, the different statues, the different memorials. Then also just walked around the market. If you've been to the Shuk in Tel Aviv, it's a little bit like that, except a lot crazy. There are live chickens running around, all sorts of live animals, and it goes on for blocks and blocks. So that's really an experience. Tried some of the local food that it's well known for. And in Nablus, there's a lot of sightseeing to do. There's Jacob's Well and Tomb. And then in the Old City, there are a lot of historic and religiously significant sites. So we really focused on, seeing everything that you need to see that's kind of on your checklist for these cities, but also kind of getting a feel for the culture, a feel for what it's like for people there, whether it's going to the cafes, going to the hookah bars, and the places that there are bars, going to the bars. Tried to experience it from as many angles as was possible in the time frame we were there.
So how was the communication with the people?
Every time we've gone, we've had at least one Arabic speaker. In Ramallah, I don't even think it's necessary. Pretty much everyone speaks English. You'll be able to get around just using English. That was also, from what I recall, the case in Bethlehem. In Nablus, it's different. In Nablus, most people do not speak English. You'll still find a way to get around. It's not a big city. You can get around through pointing and everything, but it does help to have at least one person on your trip that speaks Arabic.
Do you want to tell us one story that really sticks to your memory?
The one that really sticks out was actually with you. So for the audience, me and Valerie and a bunch of other people had gone into Nablus, and we were taking a trip to the Old City with a family friend, and she guided us to this abandoned, I don't know, was it a castle or a mosque? I don't even remember what it was. We had to walk through a few alleys, through a few fields of overgrown grass to get there, and climbed to the top of it, got a beautiful view of the city, but it wasn't maybe the safest structure. As we were climbing down, things were falling apart. So we climbed down, and I made it to the bottom, I breathed a sigh of relief that I didn't fall to my death, and Valerie was right behind me, and she also made it. But while she was taking the last step, her camera fell and dropped onto a lawn on the other side of a fence. Where your camera was in the backyard of an apartment building. So we thought, okay, maybe we could get some of these people to come out and help us and hand it to us, or let us come around. So we start yelling to them, and I'm telling an abbreviated version of the story, but we started yelling to them, and they came out of their window, and we're trying to explain, but we're shouting across a big field, and the language barrier is too great. So we saw a bunch of kids that were playing nearby, and we thought maybe they could help us. So they're right here. We'll explain it to them up close, and then they'll go and explain it to. So we tried that, and they went over. But instead of explaining calmly what our situation was, they started shaking the fence and trying to tear it down. And naturally, the people whose apartment it was weren't all too pleased about that, and started really, really getting angry at us. So finally, we left, and I can say, personally, I was ready to give up on your camera. But we happened to run into somebody that the kids knew, somebody who was closer to our age, and we told them what had happened, and he said, "Oh, I happen to know those people. Why don't you come with me? We'll go to their apartment and sort this out." And I at the time didn't think this was the best idea. These people had just seen us trying to tear down their fence and yelling at us, and we're a bunch of Ashkenazis, so I kind of thought maybe we shouldn't just show up at these people's apartment, but we have a democratic process in these trips, and I was overruled. So we went to their apartment, knocked on their door. At first, the daughter came to the door. It was very sweet, and then the woman who had been yelling at us came to the door, and one of the kids was with us, and she went off on the kid. I don't speak Arabic well enough to know exactly what she was saying, but I'd imagine it was, "Why the heck are you trying to tear down our fence?" But then she came up to me and starts speaking to me in Arabic in a very calm way. And eventually she invites us in, offers us tea, coffee, beautiful place. And we're trying to communicate. And they say, "Listen, if you want to take a picture, just lean out the window and take a picture." So they had thought we were making such a big deal because we wanted to take a picture of their lawn. And eventually we were able to get it sorted out, show them that we dropped the camera. And they said, "Oh, okay, of course you guys can go back and get there, but there's no back door. You guys have to figure out how to get there on our own." And by this time, a bunch of people had kind of come over to see what the commotion was, heard this woman chewing out this kid. We end up walking down a few alleys, and by this point, there somehow a crowd, I don't exactly remember how, but somehow kind of a crowd had formed around us to see what was going on. And finally, we find where this lawn is. We were, of course, about 20 meters below it, so we had to, I think, scale a wall and climb on a pile of garbage to get up there. And finally, we climb up, and one of the kids finds the camera. By this point, really a group of probably, would you say a dozen people had gathered?
Definitely, yeah.
And, the kid holds up the camera as if it's the Stanley Cup, and everyone, starts clapping and hugging us and taking pictures. It was really an experience. It's something, that's the type of thing. Obviously, not everybody's going to have something like that, and that's not the type of thing you read about in tour books when you're seeing what to see. But these are the type of experiences that you have if you go to these places. That was a lot of fun. That was something that really sticks out in my mind. And I guess I have you to thank for that, for not properly securing your camera in your purse.
So do you think it's important to experience things outside the curriculum as well?
Absolutely. I mean, you could live here for as long as you want, but without learning about the history, without learning about what's going on outside of your region, you're going to have a very limited view. And by the same token, if you're at a university in the United States studying the Middle East, yes, you're learning about what's happening, the way you read it in the newspapers. You're learning about the history in terms of memorizing dates and everything. But you're probably not experiencing it, and you're probably not going to be able to relate to what you're studying in the same way as you do living here. So I really think the combination of both is very important. It does give you at least the opportunity to have a type of understanding and comfort with the topic and with the region that there's really no other way of having.
And could you take something from the program, something that you've already learned that helped you on these trips?
My little bit of Arabic has helped a little bit more in terms of saying one thing and having somebody understand what it means, and that boosting my confidence. It is cool when you're learning about something in a textbook, or when you're learning about something in a class lecture and then you go and see it. When you're learning about the traditions that Muslims have to pray 5 times a day, and then you're woken up at 4 a.m. by the call to prayer, and at least, you're still bitter because you want to get some sleep, but at least you understand why. So it definitely did make a difference.
And what do you think about the future? Do you want to work on the Middle East in the future?
I would love to do so. I love this area. I love this region. I love this country. Well, I worked for 4 years as a journalist before I came here, covering local issues in Westchester and Putnam County, New York. And I love journalism. I love writing. I love the type of research that goes into journalism. And it's kind of my hope that I could go back to journalism, focusing on something that relates to the Middle East with my knowledge, with my comfort, and with my experience. A lot of it depends on what's around, what's available, and what's realistic.
Thanks for listening to the Rihla Podcast. We have more episodes coming out soon, so stay tuned. For more information on the MA in Middle Eastern Studies program and how to apply, visit mames-israel.org. That's MAMES-Israel.org.